needed, okay, well, how many people in America are farmers? It's like 1% of the population. I mean, we need the farmers. I love food. I'm not crazy about the way they do their farming, torturing animals. And by the way, just to connect it once more to COVID, we are never going to be done with disease like COVID while we are still torturing animals. It all comes from animals. Now we have to worry about bird flu. It's birds and pigs.
We're back in the wet market again, where it's like it's like there's bad shipping is on those places.
That's right, and that's why that also could be where it came from. But it always jumps from animals to people, and it wouldn't if we didn't pen up the animals and torture them before we eat them.
It seems like.
Let me be non-funny. Your point about sickness and the possibility of future pandemics absolutely speaks to the need for international cooperation. Because a pandemic is not going to be an American issue, it's not going to be a Chinese issue. We're going to have to bring the world together to deal with climate, to deal with pandemics.
Okay. Should law enforcement be policing TikTok in order to crack down on illegal trends like the viral challenge to steal Kias and Hyundais? Oh yeah, do you know about this? There's TikTok videos that show how you could, with just I think a screwdriver and a iPhone charger, you can hotwire a Kia and Hyundai, so like they're being stolen left and right. What do you think about TikTok? That's another thing that's before Congress. Somebody has a bill to ban TikTok, certainly for people under 16. I think that's Josh Hawley's bill.
Well, I think the concern is TikTok is a Chinese-owned company, and you're seeing states and the U.S. government not wanting to use it for fear that some secretive information can fall into Chinese hands.
Well, but also it's rotting the minds of our young people.
Well, it's a whole other story, but that's beyond TikTok, isn't it?
It is, but TikTok is not helping.
I would say the rotting of the minds of America's youth is a problem that exists long before TikTok.
It made it
Like one of the great things about being young.
Made it much worse. Kids at least used to read a book. I don't think kids ever see a book. They do not read, they scroll. Scrolling does not make you smart.
Not to become overly serious, I think it is now perceived that the pandemic has made the mental health crisis that we previously had even worse. And there is a lot of discussion about the impact of social media and the isolation, the lack of human contact that it develops on our health.
All right. Russell, what are your thoughts on the UFOs that were intercepted and shot down by the U.S. military last month? I don't know if they're referring to the Chinese balloons. They were not UFOs because we know what they were. They were Chinese balloons. But there were other things. There were some things that they shot that we didn't get, and we don't know what they are. And they're the things that we haven't found out what they are after we did shoot them down.
I wonder whether or not the $14 trillion that have been granted to the Pentagon, 55% of which has ended up in the hands of the military-industrial complex, which surely American people are becoming weary of, needs occasionally to be boosted with fanciful ideas of extraterrestrial invasion. Maybe there needs to be a continual reminder that the skies themselves could become a threat unless Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems continue to profit. Elsewise, a balloon, a perfect metaphor, for it is more hot air, nothing inside it, shot down by a $400,000 missile, might be coming for your family.
We were just saying here we all should be skeptical and have open minds on everything. It is possible that there's life on other planets that are visiting us or scouting us. I mean, there are even the U.S. I'm just saying it's possible. Carl says
It is not possible,
okay.
But if you think that something from another universe came all the way here and was just kind of dragging around and was shot down very easily, I think if it's a UFO, they would have done a little bit better in avoiding invading that concept.
First of all, we're not saying it's from another universe. We're saying it's from the same universe. The universe is very big. Very big.
I think Bernie raises a good point. It's not like E.T. would come all the way here and then trip up outside the alien's house. He's making it all the way here.
No.
That's the point.
That's the point, Bernie.
Okay. The Chinese balloon is different. I'm not saying the Chinese balloon was from another universe or this universe.
I mean, it would have to be from China. If it's a Chinese balloon, and I mean that with all due respect,
Unless the
that's the least it can do.
Well,
I was gonna say, I think
I'm moving on.
the obvious.
If you want Bernie back out here, he won't be happy if you're going to talk about extraterrestrials and balloons and that.
If you're
Inequality!
looking for proof that there's life in outer space, intelligent life in outer space, you need to look no further than Russell. There's not really another accounting for how.
I'm glad that became a compliment, sir, because I was rearing up.
No, you right. Only compliments, my friend.
With all the emphasis on DEI, are we confusing equality of opportunity with trying to guarantee equity in outcomes? Okay, that's interesting because I think this word equity has come into the language in the last few years, and before that we didn't hear it a lot, and I think a lot of people hear equity and they hear equality, that it's the same word, and it's not the same word in the same concept. So how would you differentiate between equity and equality?
Well, equality, we talk about, I don't know what the answer to that is. Coming to think of it, equality is equality of opportunity. All right? We live in a society, we want all people to have whatever color your skin is.
Equity, I think, is more guarantee of outcome, is it not?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so which side do you come down on?
Equality.
Equality.
Yeah.
Okay. Boys, any comment on that one?
I just don't know if that's the definitional difference, but certainly the question of equality of outcome over equality of opportunity is one that, it's the question that underlies affirmative action and everything else that we've had in our politics for a very long time. And there's obviously a very strong, even people who actually want equality of outcome say they only want equality of opportunity and vice versa. But that's, that issue, that core of that, what do you actually want? And I think Bernie is where everyone says they want to be, but there are in fact programs that have been designed to actually engineer equal outcomes, not just equal opportunity, and that's where a lot of the controversy is.
Okay, one more. Have Democrats done enough to support strong labor unions, Bernie? What's the future of unions in this country? I think
New study shows that heart attack deaths increased by 30%.
Is just simply an excuse to get together to talk about the state of the world, what's hot, what's not, what's interesting, what's coming, what's going. These seem to be the things on everybody's mind. There's a palpable acceleration of historical novelty. You don't have to be a weatherman to see which way the wind is blowing. The question is, there's growing consensus that we have managed ourselves into a situation where any path out is going to be fairly dramatic and transforming. And then the question is, how dramatic, how transforming, can it be managed? Is it a human-initiated crisis, and can it therefore be managed by human management strategies, or are we no more than the ant before the hurricane, and this just in the warp and woof of the evolution of the planet, we have come now to a period of dissolution and chaotic recasting. I'm interested personally in I guess in a way, all my interests lead back to history, to the human experience on the planet, which I take to be an extraordinarily unpaid bills of the historical process. I've been here for 10 days, and there's been a lot of talk already under the bridge in terms of anything we might say to each other or take away from these meetings. I am a resolute optimist of a very complicated sort, and it troubles me that I have to say of a very complicated sort, because I just always thought of myself as an optimist. But I realize, listening to people play back what they imagine they've heard me say, that it comes off as scary to some people. Because I'm not a conservative of any sort. I don't think very much of what we have created is going to survive the keyhole through which we must pass to get to a sane world beyond the contradictions of a dwindling environment and a rapacious economic system and enormous power concentrated in the hands of a few, enormous misery experienced by vast numbers of people. Because my faith, based on, well, basically just a lifetime of edge running, living in marginal societies, taking psychedelic drugs, spending time with Aboriginal people, staying out of America during some of its more dramatic convulsions. All that has led to the conclusion for me that the thing we are caught up in is not our fault, nor can it be managed by goodwill. And since there doesn't seem to be much, that's sort of a moot question anyway. The thing that we are caught up in is what we have been caught up in for a very long time. The oldest skeletons of Homo sapiens sapiens, a double-thinking hominid, are 100,000 years old. They didn't spring from nowhere. Probably Homo sapiens sapien is 150 to 200,000 years old on this planet. And in us, nature has decided to take a very dramatic set of chances. And though the results are not in, essentially it appears that it's going to come out in the next couple of decades. I think that nature is the great source of optimism in all of this. That history, far from being the harbinger of extinction and catastrophe, as it's interpreted by linear empirical thinkers, is instead a slow dawning of a transcendental possibility that, casts its light over essentially at least 1 million years of human becoming, and that from the very beginning of the stirrings of self-reflection, the observation of the rising or setting of stars on the horizon, the observation that sex is linked to procreation, the dimmest awareness in our species has been pointed toward the revelation of a something that is in the biology of the planet. And history, as we have experienced it since the fall of Rome, an endless ebb and flow of dynastic rulership, expanded technological capability, expanded coding systems, so forth and so on. And history, as we have experienced it since, say, 1900, an ever-expanding electromagnetic sphere of information transfer, an ever more dramatic collapse of distances and boundaries. History is not simply the record of the random walk of a higher animal. It is, in fact, the thing which we have been, I think, most taught to suspect, evening to sort of set the stage, and those of you who've read my books will recognize the theme. The reason I believe that we have reached an end to the historical journey is because now the only metaphors which make any sense are the metaphors that lie outside of history. The whole of the 20th century can be understood as an enormous turning in the mind of Western civilization toward the archaic, toward the prehistorical. And we who have grown up, visiting the Hall of Dinosaurs at the American Museum of Natural History and so forth, this is not such a big deal for us. But this dimension to our lives is very new and very modern. Bishop Usser believed that the world was created in 4004 BC. That was a reasonable opinion to be held by a member of the British intelligentsia 150 years ago. When the cave paintings at Lascaux were discovered by shepherds in the south of France, they brought the great men from the academies of Paris to view these things, and they assured their discoverers that they had doubtless been done by members of the Grand Army of Napoleon who had overwintered there in the winter of 1812. The idea that these paintings could have been done 25,000 years ago by human beings was utterly inconceivable. The idea that the earth could have a history that would reach back 4,000 million years is an entirely modern understanding of what is possible. And in this discovery of the archaic, from paleontology, from archaeology, also comes an awareness that much of the world, until very recently, has remained archaic, that tribal structures set in place at the melting of the last glaciers are in place today in many parts of the world with very complex social structures, religious beliefs, theories of polity, medicine, so forth and so on. But medicine, key concept here, because these Aboriginal societies that have kept the archaic toolkit, when we sort through that toolkit, there's more there than fish poisons and abortifacients and even contraceptives. What there are psychedelic plants. And again, those of us who have grown up with the assumption of psychedelic plants or even synthetic psychedelic chemistry tend to forget that this has all arrived on the plate of Western civilization in the last 100 years. Mescaline was characterized in 1888, harmine in 1928, LSD discovered in 37, not really known until after the war, psilocybin 53, DMT 56, everything made illegal in 66. These things are very new on in the catalog of the artifactoria that we have looted from cultures around the world. And because they are illegal, very little is known about them. The issues raised in the 1960s around these substances have never been settled. The use of them was savagely repressed. The government proved it could repress, but it never was then able to deliver on the only excuse there is for government repression, which is the prosecution of a reasonable social agenda. That never happened. But more is at stake here than American civilization and its attitude towards psychedelics. The whole of the 20th century is characterized by this nostalgia for the archaic. It begins when Picasso brings African masks to Paris in 1910. It even begins earlier than that, when Impressionism deconstructs the photographic realism of late Romanticism and instead turns everything into shimmering light and surfaces. Certainly, pataphysics and Dada, the precursors of surrealism, were attacks on the sensibilities of the petty bourgeois, for sure, but also a breaking up of the expectations of linear time that had been created in the West since the Industrial Revolution generally. A whole bunch of things, we don't have to dwell on them, but jazz, abstract expressionism, sexual permissiveness, rock and roll, body piercing,